Hello, I'm Alessandro Marianantoni, Director at M Accelerator. It's a hybrid accelerator incubator program, and we work with students, early stage and later stage founders. Some of you may know already that around mid-March, we essentially over a couple of days, we needed to move our programs online. But it didn't actually happen overnight. And that's what we're going to discuss and talk about with our guest. And it's not really a guest because I work with Scott, but I'm really, really happy to introduce our lead coach, M Accelerator, Scott Hindell.
Hi, good to be here.
So Scott, you're not just, you also have several other titles, and could you introduce a little bit yourself, please?
Sure. So I've been, I have a history in portfolio management that turned into private equity management, which turned into more consulting and teaching. In the late 90s, I was doing more management around private equity, which led to an invitation from UCLA Extension in 2001 to teach a program. And I've pretty much taught year-round there, up to 3 programs a quarter, both live and online, hybrid, as well as I'm a master instructor. I teach the instructors how to teach there. But I've been teaching one thing or another for over 30 years. Pretty much have taught since I was very young in my teens, from sports now to business management. I've taught also at LA Community College for about 10 years. No longer, but I did.
Well, that's great. That's really in line with what we're going to discuss today. So the topic is online training, and hot topic, especially in these weeks. For us personally, eventually, because some of you like us may have kids at home studying remotely, more or less. And of course, professionally, since it's online or digital or learning through a computer, it became part of our work since many years ago. So let's start with some conversation and questions that I have for Scott. I remember also that talking about learning, I remember one of my high school teachers used to say that if we are going to have such amount of students failing this year, it means that the teacher or the school don't really work properly. So nowadays I'm thinking about online training, online learning, and there is a number that is pretty meaningful, and it's the dropout rate, for which I believe it's between 90 and 97% of dropout rate for online programs. So Scott, how is that most of these online training programs don't actually work?
So a couple of things I would say, starting off is that if it's I would say voluntary learning as opposed to maybe your normal matriculation and association with achieving a degree or something like that, you do see like extraordinary, even maybe higher dropout rates. The stickiness, they either capture you, I think, within the first 5 minutes or so, or they lose you, right? So I was brought up, fortunately, my early days of teaching sports was brought up in a humanistic methodology of teaching, which is now called student-centered teaching. The great thing about in-person teaching for most good teachers is you have the ability to capture someone in a place and time, and that gives you a certain amount of control, right? And different than a book or a video or something like that is that it allows for you to essentially them to get glimpses of your thinking, to get feedback. And the basis of humanistic teaching or student-centered teaching is you're attaching their mental tentacles to certain points so that they can make a greater get a greater sense of what they're doing. You know, when we start out every program at M Accelerator, my first session with them is I put something in their hand, have them close their eyes, and I tell them, you can't move your hand, you can't open your eyes, and try and guess what it is is in your hand. They can't. We allow them to use two hands, but keeping their eyes closed. And pretty quickly, after they have maybe 3 or 4 or 6 data points, they're able to figure out what's in their hand. In a live situation, we have that ability, right? We can attach their mental tentacles to the various parts and help them recognize something. In an online environment, it hasn't been figured out by most people yet. We both have experience in what I would say is more of a workshop form of teaching online. And that's what we're doing with currently with the program. But most online learning is not too different than a book, and it maybe not even as efficient as a book or a well-edited video. And I think that's where people bounce out pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. But let's contextualize a little bit what we are saying. I mean, just want to give you the opportunity to say, tell us about a little bit your experience with online virtual learning and coaching at large.
Okay, so I've taught since the very early days at Extension with online. Blackboard in the beginning was the learning management system that we used. And I think the novelty of it, people were highly engaged. But as they became, this tool is, the novelty wore off, is essentially you're just left with the medium. And I saw, you know, let's say the interest level drop over time. The discussions became a little more forced as opposed to natural. And I think that's what you see in most programs these days, if they even have a discussion component. You know, when you have a synchronous session, you're allowing people to hopefully get back and forth, but you have to, I don't think most programs are using those synchronous sessions properly. And it's also not necessarily very natural for people to ask questions. The things that happen in a classroom can be a little more awkward in a group online setting. So what we try to do at the Accelerator in the live version, what we've been doing in our Zoom synchronous sessions, is we try to get the learning loops pretty tight so we can have multiple learning loops in a program. So they come prepared with something, they break out into little groups, work on something, come back, and then the whole nature of it is just review, discuss, go back in, try again. And this iteration, this iterative approach, which is more like a workshop, we keep them more engaged, and it's a much more natural, I'd say, environment. However, one of the mandates of online learning is flexible, engaging, and efficient. So you really have to think, what do they not need to be with me and can do on their own, maybe in preparation, but what is better handled, and how to organize that to make these greater connections, or put more, like I said, mental tentacles onto things so that they can actually grasp the task. Because otherwise, why wouldn't they just go to a well-done video, read a book, something like that? I actually think there's maybe a good point to mention. Learning comes in sort of 3 phases, right? There's the inspiration or motivational phase first. You know, getting them excited, this is what you could do with this, and basically turning on the desire to want to know, to want to go down this path. The second stage is the conceptual stage, where you actually break things apart, make the connections, and add the layers of basically what you can do, all the what ifs and things like that. And then the third is experiential, which is maybe more in time, where they get to experience things and develop the finesse to be able to execute that properly. Our program fits neatly in the conceptual phase. We don't really need to motivate people. They already are motivated when we get them. I think that's an important distinction, because there's a desire to want to know already. And once you have a desire to want to know, if you execute it properly, I think you can make these mental connections and help them recognize things. and well, like we like to say in the program, give them the power to manipulate the various elements to produce different outcomes. And then, you know, life will take it from there in the experiential phase. But in that conceptual phase, I really think you need someone to walk with you and point things out, help you make those touch points to better recognize what it is and what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's great, and actually remind me that we put really a lot of elements inside our programs, and sometimes when we start promoting a new program, it starts to be clear and effective with messages, and also that those messages describes what is that we are doing. I mean, what is that is going to happen during the program. We embed so much into the experience we offer that it's really hard to explain. To fully explain what is actually happening unless somebody goes through the program, right? So let's do this exercise. You already started. Let's try to deconstruct some of the elements from different angles. What is that is happening during a learning experience? So how is that we're working with students, but also we're working with business founders, and a little bit more about our hands-on experience, our hands-on approach. I mean, that is different from a standard curriculum. Can you articulate a little bit on that?
Yeah, maybe a couple or a few examples. So one thing you and I know is that if we can get them there and they can come in and watch us in action. So we pretty happy to invite people to come in to the live setting and watch a session, sit in. And we've had even recently two very successful people that have already actually achieved either awards or notable accomplishments in other countries, funding, things like that. And they came into the program, and once they saw things, they sign up immediately, because what it was for them, I believe, is just most learning is associated with the idea of, I'd say, heuristics, general rules of thumb. And unfortunately, I think instructors are too apt to give those. But the problem with, and our belief is that general rules of thumb are prone to errors and mistakes. And kind of like you were talking about with your Italian teacher when you were young, is just that we believe more in the idea of mastery, is that really making the connections and helping, the keyword here, develop an understanding so that you can produce so much more out of it. So when they come into the session, they see us, let's say, in practice, attaching these mental tentacles to various elements. And it is not necessarily easy to articulate, and maybe not even easy to believe until you see it. But the way our programs are organized now online too, but also live, is just, again, these learning loops. So we are getting people to quickly, some people call these sprints, quickly apply a principle, get it down there. And the idea is that we get them to practice something quickly. And we believe that errors or mistakes are opportunities to shine the spotlight of attention on that area with more focus, and see what went wrong, and more importantly, see the possibilities. It's counterfactuals, what ifs, if you will, and then we encourage the ability to manipulate those things till you achieve the desired outcome. It can take a couple of weeks for us to get everybody comfortable, sometimes faster than others, but we get people really comfortable with this iterative process, that there is no perfection, there is no right answer. It's not what you go through, it's how you go through it. And we work really deliberately to get them through cycles achieving mastery, as opposed to understand this concept, go do it, it's a kind of okay, and then move on to the next thing. I think too much of learning is, did you understand that? You passed the quiz or whatever, and move on to the next thing. We actually keep playing with things. And I think that all culminates at the end. The best part of the program is the last 2 weeks, where these learning loops get even tighter and tighter. And we can get so many edits, for example, on a deck before the final pitch day. And then when they go into that pitch day, they're so confident because they have reworked and their understanding in a way that they can clearly articulate it. And we see that with in the success of the events. Everybody's quite open about how impressed they are of how articulate and how well these people understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's how we created our small success, and more news will come over the next few weeks. But you touched on something. I mean, on something that about the motivation and the confidence. I mean, as far as I know, we don't have any motivational class, right? Any motivational course. But so how is that we're still building up confidence in our participants?
Entrepreneurship's a weird thing, and I think what we're doing is maybe more important than what most accelerators do. I work with a lot of internationals. I've worked with over 86 countries, and unfortunately, you know, California, especially Los Angeles, is sort of a special place. I think Los Angeles is even more innovative in way, at least as a culture, is more innovative in ways than, say, even San Francisco, because we really appreciate people taking a chance. It doesn't have to fit any sort of model. In San Francisco, as innovative as it is, it sort of has to fit a model of what they think is maybe best at that moment. Whereas Los Angeles has always been a little bit more tolerant, I think, with the wild and funky and all that stuff, so long as it's genuine and authentic. They don't really like the whole idea of business is something you do to people. It's something you do for people. Now you go to the internationals around the world, and culturally speaking, I mean, my wife's from Brazil. I work in India, China, Brazil, worked with a lot of Italians, work with people all over the world. And unfortunately, you hear the same thing over and over, is people really challenge entrepreneurs, particularly in, I'd say, the more affluent classes, as, do you have a degree in that? What makes you think you can do that, right? And they are sort of defeated that they have to have these, I would say, inferred credentials. Like they've have to have some work somewhere or have some degree that infers that they would be able to be successful at this. And what we do is we develop what we call intrinsic credibility. And the simple way we do that is help them understand what they're doing. So essentially they achieve a PhD in their business model, and they do it deliberately. So as we know, in most businesses fail because they tend to copy other businesses thinking what they're doing is working when in reality it's not. I'd say we empower these people to come to their own reason for being, with making a lot of connections to make better predictions. And that confidence isn't something we give them, it's something that builds. And by the end of the program, and that's the thing we hear the most, even for the ones that came for the startup experience and maybe went into a professional position back in their country, we still hear the great thing is just that anything's possible. I believe if I can understand it, I can do it. And I'd say that's the highlight of any sort of mentoring or coaching experience, is that we gave them the power to control their own destiny. So
yeah, that's amazing. It's actually what our participants are sending us messages, emails, and stuff. And that's why we put it on our website. I mean, it's not something that we came up with. It's actually the specific words our participants used. But stop to brag about it. You mentioned coaches and mentors. Can you, in your experience, can you articulate a little bit what it entails to be a coach, what it entails to be a mentor? Why is so different from being an instructor?
Yeah, so management in most business education is what I would say closed-ended, is that more of a guided discovery. These are tried and true practices. And a teacher of those is guiding you towards somewhere they need you to go. The inherent nature of entrepreneurship is you're dealing with unknowns. You're tasked with going out and figuring out something that nobody else has figured out. Even if you are sort of copying a business model but putting it into a different city or neighborhood or country, is that there are unknowns that you are, the mandate is that you figure those out and assimilate that concept to that culture, is it must address a problem in an exceptionally useful way compared to the alternatives. So we, I mean, and both of our nature is that we don't pretend to know what you should do. Is I like to say, we don't tell you where you're going to go. We walk with you. We're really good at seeing things, pointing things out. Hey, take a look at that. Let's play with that. Let's see what's going on here. And helping see the connections. We never know ultimately where it's going to go, but we can, let's say, recognize the path as it evolves in front of us. And as we're making these connections, developing this understanding, we're helping them get these eyes for it. There is a bit of unlearning in the beginning of a program, because our approach is more acquisition as opposed to learned. There's nothing to learn here. It's to acquire an understanding. So people are used to learned, and they want to know, what is this? What should I be looking for? Well, we don't know yet. Let's wander around. It's more of what they call abductive logic. So we have to get them used to kind of not knowing and wandering through this and pointing things out. And once we do that, we like to say, look closer, break it into its pieces, try to get some space between. The more space between, the more likely you're to see how these things work together. And so that would, for me, that's what a true coach is. A true coach is not leading you to somewhere they already know you need to go, which is guided discovery. It's more what's called guided exploration. We are good with walking with you.
And definitely that we had this conversation. I mean, it's not fair, because we had a lot of conversations about these topics,
For years,
and I told you many times that all of that coming from you, right? That you're being in business field as a consultant, as an instructor, as a coach, and resonate a lot with everything I've done in the past as a designer, as an artist, all the work that I've done at UCLA. So can you articulate a little bit of that? Just because in English definitely sounds better from you, like the relationship between this design approach and what is that we're talking about.
No problem. Actually, I'll borrow from Roger Martin, the former dean of the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto. I would say he's much like us, or we're much like him. And he said, we need more MFAs, not MBAs. And someone might say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, the whole nature of an MBA program in most cases is to learn what the knowns, what works, right? But there's not a lot of what I was talking about, open-endedness to it. And MFAs, particularly schools like CalArts. So I know a few people that have gone through CalArts, which is the school that for example, a lot of Pixar people go to, is the only thing you know in that MFA program is sort of where you enter and where you exit. But you have an advisor, and otherwise you develop your own curriculum, and they challenge you to do something you've never done before. You and I, that's how we approach everything. I mean, we talked about how we did it as kids and how we do it professionally. I don't, even though it's an easy title as consultant, but I don't tell I learned a long time ago, don't tell your clients what to do. Because if they don't understand it and it doesn't work out, they're going to probably blame you, right? Instead, what I do is and I'm more busy than ever lately with all the new things that we have to figure out because of the virus, but is that I pull things apart and help them see all of the elements. They work with me, we arrange it. So I essentially extract the data, in most cases they already have, organize it, and all of a sudden they go, oh, I should do this. And I said, yeah, sure looks like that, right? If you do it that way, you really don't have to tell someone what to do. They have, again, enough connections that they can see what to do. So, whatever I've ever done, whether it was managing money, teaching sports, all those things, consulting, working with you, working at UCLA, it's always been for me the same thing, is that I'm just trying to help sort of turn on the senses get things separated, but I believe everybody is capable of figuring these things out themselves. And the best thing you can, get at the end of the day is just that, wow, you really made me think. And the irony is that actually this is how we're born. I've got 3 children. One is she's graduated math and decision sciences, but I brought them up all up the same. And the last 2 are 5 and about to turn 9. And I'm even more aware of my philosophy, my teaching philosophy. My kids are constantly acquiring an understanding. My son's teaching himself how to read, not because I'm forcing him. He started to look at something. I just showed him how I look and break it apart. And all of a sudden he's started reading in just a couple of weeks without any learning. He's just figuring it out himself. We do the same thing. I think you and I've done the same thing in all of our professions. We don't have this absolute idea of how something should be done. We look at it, everything is sort of an adventure, a journey, a process. So.
No, that's amazing. And talking about the journey, the discovery process, I think it's a good lead for me to introduce what is that. Can you describe a little bit what is that we started last Monday?
So we're doing a fun program. So the nature of entrepreneurship, as we mentioned, is unknowns. I used to manage money and also have been through several, let's say, crises or recessions with my clients. And Alessandro and I were talking, and I said, this is a great opportunity for us to do something with our alumni to kind of reinforce this idea of working with unknowns. I said, because this crisis, more than any other, people are trying to figure things out every day. So we decided it would be a fun task to model what a certain business model would look like on August 1st, as things start to open up into this new temporary, we don't know how long, but normal. So we picked Shake Shack. And so we have 13 groups, almost 40 people working in groups on modeling. It's sort of a challenge competition, modeling what they would present, let's say the CEO or chairman of Shake Shack, if tasked with what's the new normal? How do you achieve an operating profit in this new normal? Maybe what we should propose, who knows, rent abatement or other things to achieve this operating profitability. And it's funny, even though they've been through the program, some of them are saying, well, what's this information? Where is this? And we don't tell them where it is, but we clue them in. Alessandro and I clue them in to, did you maybe look at this or this? And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, and they're off to the races. So I'd say that's the spirit of it, is just that, and entrepreneurship, I don't believe you create opportunities. We don't create things that people have to have. We discover those things. And that's a big part of our program, is helping people discover those things. And back to the online teaching aspect of it, is just that, I think that's the thing that's missing in a lot of online programs, is just that this isn't something you can tell people what to do. It's something you have to work through with them. You have to see where they're sort of stumbling with it. In my early days of teaching, I taught in the snow skiing, and it was actually the most difficult teaching certification I've ever gotten. They have 3 levels. You learn not only obviously a mastery of skiing, but teaching models, biomechanics, physics, many things, child development. And I was a supervisor eventually, and I taught instructors how to teach and tested them. It was so funny. They were using technical language quickly. And I said, the student has only had this equipment for, how many times, maybe even only 15 minutes. And you're speaking in terminology they don't know. Why don't you focus on something they do have, like their ankle, their knee, their foot? What should they be doing with those things? As soon as you start talking to someone in that way, things go really fast, and then you can see where they snag, and then you all you have to do is point out a little thing and then let them experiment, and quickly they're doing well. I mean, if you've ever taught someone to ride a bike, you can see that they just learn a fine little adjustment, and then their computer takes over and they know what to do. You can't teach someone to ride a bike really without that experience and maybe pointing out a couple of things, right? So did that help answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, another question came up in my mind that's a little bit more nasty, I would say, because sometimes when I'm talking to founders, so business founders, startups with definitely more different degree of being more experienced than other younger founders, let's say. And I say, and I describe what we do, and they're excited. Yeah, we would like to be part of it. We need a go-to-market strategy. We need to develop the business. We need so many things, right? And I say, yeah, our structure is that we have a program. We have different lengths and different durations. I mean, and as soon as I start talking about we have a program, there's something that they have to take. It's where the difficulty comes up. I mean, how would you describe a more like not necessarily very experienced, but definitely a business founder? I mean, everything we're being articulating, it may not resonate too much with all entrepreneurs, right? So how would you defend that? How would you articulate that to a business founder?
So like we mentioned, if we can get them in there and they can watch it, they quickly realize what we were talking about. But I guess theoretically, it's hard for them to understand. It sounds like, oh, I've already done that, right? At the end of the day, it's all about, I would say, direction and deliberateness. And the inherent nature of entrepreneurship is sort of schizophrenic. We know that when we get them, oftentimes that at whatever stage, actually, and even more so maybe the more developed they are, is they're all over the place. They see something over here and then squirrel, over here, and they're just kind of spinning in all directions. We say they're kind of schizophrenic. Our program actually gets to the nucleus, let's say the central node of all of their entrepreneurial efforts. And ideally, of course, someone would come in early stage with us, ideate with us, and then the life becomes much easier for them coming out of the program. Of course, when you've already put a lot of effort, one thing we've seen is I've already built the site, I've already built the prototype, or I've already built the packaging. And we say, well, if you can, put a hold on that just for a second. And what we'll do is just make that process a little more deliberate. And sometimes they listen, more times they don't. And they're running it simultaneously. And then inevitably 2 to 3 weeks in, they go like, oh, wow, I can't believe I did that. And because you don't, oftentimes, where are you getting the ideas of why you should do that, right? What we do is focus on the core of that understanding, and essentially everything extends off of that as a node, and it becomes all connected, deliberate. So we stop the spinning. We like to say we help them see the wall where the opportunity is, begin to see the target on the wall. And only through time and practice will you get really good at hitting that target. But by the end of our program, you have a good sense of where that target is. And it makes all of your efforts exponentially more efficient and clear. Of course, there are deviations in the path, but for ours, there are no huge pivots, I would say, directly out of the program. It's minor pivots within that same wall. The target might you moved a little bit, or you've got to deal with some element to get to that target, but we're talking about much finer movements. And it's almost always the same case as they say, well, man, I wish I knew this earlier. But in the end, everything becomes much more targeted. I mean, I think one of our favorite cases is someone that actually has come in already with success, even a product, and the funding, and they come out of the program with even a clear idea of something that they were doing, but didn't realize that, we're big fans of editing. Success isn't just what you do, but it's what you deliberately don't do. It's pulling away that which isn't important, so you can bring focus and divergence to the thing that is most important. We help make things, I'd say, a lot tighter, a lot clearer, which allows you to understand the little movements that are necessary to get, I'd say, more optimal in your
efforts. Yeah, that's great. I mean, while you were describing, my mind went through sometimes when I try to explain what we do compared to other programs or to other business model. I would say to me it sounds like that we don't want to get too philosophical, but we actually believe in the learning process, right? So we believe more in the individuals or in the people that are coming through the program, learning to improve their situation, unlock a lot of their potentiality of opportunities, and actually run their businesses, bootstrap a company, or become manager better than when they entered the program. So how would what do you think about this? It definitely, I mean, there's a lot of technology in our program, right? So we do a lot of tests. We use a lot of digital marketing. I teach myself SEO strategies and a lot of those experiments. But definitely, technology is not, probably because I've been working with technology for most of my life, if not all. But technology is never the center. I mean, it's more like everything built around the person. Yeah. So you and I are sort of allergic to the idea of an absolute in any case, even for ourselves. We caution people, we're not up here telling you what to do. We're not here preaching gospel or anything like follow our way. We actually don't really believe in methods because we believe those are potentially traps. They don't facilitate actual thinking. You and I would say more than normal are sort of relentless in our effort to seek out the truth, to actually discover and see and understand and play with and see what we can do with this thing. That's all we're doing with them. Is we believe everybody possesses that capability. I mean, all three of my kids. I mean, I think the greatest thing I can do for them is just that you can do anything you put your mind to. I just got to help you develop the sensibility to be able to do that. And that's all we're doing for them is helping them develop the sensibility to be able to figure things out on their own. We like to see you struggle, then make the connection and get that energy within and go forward, as opposed to let's say answering the question for you and just moving past. And we also don't believe that there is just one answer. I mean, the thing that really excites me about everything I do, whether it work with a client, student, or an entrepreneur in your program, is that I get to experience this discovery with you. I get to go and figure things out with you. I don't go into any program thinking that this is what you should do. I already know what you should do. Is that it's that adventure, that generative logic or experience that it's kind of addictive, and I couldn't imagine doing the same thing over and over every day. So yeah, that's actually very exciting for me as well. I mean, participating in the discovery and the learning process, that's probably what actually motivate me the most. I mean, working with these guys with the 11 cohorts that we had the M Accelerator, and of course even before, but definitely now it's a different story. I think I went through all the topics and questions I wanted to go through, but just want to make sure I give you the opportunity to complete any thoughts or any angle you would like to revisit. One of the key things we wanted to talk about, I mean, we love talking about the program, but we also wanted to kind of talk about this online environment. And so I lead the instructor orientation at UCLA Extension, have for many, many years. So all new instructors, we have over 2,000. They come through me, and then I also lead one of the core programs for their certification if they choose to get a sort of a teaching certificate there. And I always tell them, it's just with online learning, if you think you know online learning, I said, yeah, you're lying, because we're figuring this out as we go, right? It's too new. Much of traditional learning had been sort of synthesized over hundreds of years. And of course, we were figuring things out and doing new things, but there were a lot of the fundamentals were figured out.
we're still figuring that out online. And I think you and I have tackled it immediately. We were already working on it in elements. We were adding asynchronous elements even to the live programs, and getting more and more traction, I would say, with those. And then we had the great experiment on, not the best timing, but we moved everybody online within days to complete the program. And actually, we were able to get that critical mass that we wanted, and it exceeded our wildest expectations. You and I have been having regular discussions. We know what we want to achieve based on the success of our live programs, and so far we're having a lot of fun discovering and figuring out, and the things working, and fine-tuning them a little more and moving on to the next challenge. So it's interesting times. I mean, everything's, especially post this crisis, but everything already was changing. We're navigating a virtual world as opposed to a physical world. You're not, brick and mortar isn't going to be the same, and marketing, and you're not forcing people to go to a place where there are a lot of options. They're not walking down aisles. So digital marketing is this way of figuring things out, discovering them, and virtually, and getting people, I'd say, in a more efficient, flexible way to where they want. Same thing's happening with online learning. And you and I cumulatively already have a lot of years of experience. And to me, this is sort of where we're really catching our stride, because even at UCLA, we now have a very deliberate experiment that we would have never it's one of the fortunate benefits, few fortunate benefits of this whole experience. And I think what we're going to be like on the other side of this is pretty extraordinary. So.
Thank you, Scott. I believe we could go on for hours.
We do, yeah.
I think we need another call, but I would like to thank everybody who was listening. We had a decent crowd out there live, and of course, I mean, the video stream will be available. The recording will be available on the social media network and our social channel. So thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone out there, and until next week.